right, all right, all right. We're here. Let's go ahead. Post everything up. There we go. We're here, everybody. Sorry for being so late tonight. Had to take care of some things. Also wanted to make some coffee. Because your boy's been a little tired lately. Ah, kid, welcome in. Hope you're well. Thank you for swinging by. I don't know, you'll probably be a little bit lost. But I do have... Well, there are previous streams, shall I say, for books 1 through 4. But book 1 got blacklisted because there was music in it, and I've been doing the streams without music since. But I'm re-recording book 1 for that reason. I need to finish editing that and get it up soon. I'm hoping by the end of this weekend. Books 2 through 4 I have, but I have them currently hidden until I have book 1 up, because I feel like there's no point having book 2 through 4 up without having book 1. Yeah, it was supposed to be a royalty-free playlist, but turns out it wasn't, so... All joy of joys for that. Got everything blacklisted in the US and abroad. Anyway. Neither here nor there. We're here tonight with Book 5 of Xenophon's Anabasis. There is a brief summary of the story so far at the start, and I'll give a brief rundown for those who haven't joined before. The long and the short of it is Xenophon is a soldier, one of 10,000 Greeks, who joined the Persian prince Cyrus the Younger, in the year 401 401 BC, in a fight against his brother Artaxerxes. Originally, the Greeks were misled. Cyrus gathered a bunch of troops together to try and get the drop on Artaxerxes, claiming they were all mercenaries for various different campaigns. However, as they marched across Anatolia and into the Persian lands, as they came close towards Babylon, eventually a fight broke out. Artaxerxes hadn't been so easily duped by his brother and managed to raise an army of 300,000 to Cyrus's approximately something like 50,000. Cyrus, being hopelessly outnumbered, decided to levy a charge directly at his brother. And in fairness, almost got to him and could have won the combat then and there, but he got struck with a javelin and then was fell upon by all of all of Artaxerxes' bodyguard, and was killed pretty much immediately. This left the Greeks stranded in Persia, without basically a paymaster, as they survived the fight and retreated, not realizing that Cyrus was dead. And they had to come to terms, basically, with the king, with Artaxerxes, and figure out what they were to do. They were given terms, basically surrender to Artaxerxes, and be at his mercy, surrender your arms, and he'll decide what to do with them. Or if they were to leave in any way, if they were to advance forward or to try to run away, they would be at war, and Artaxerxes would send his army to kill them. The Greeks, being hopelessly outnumbered, figured that the only thing they could realistically do was try to make their way out of the Persian territories, because to surrender their arms to the man who they just fought a war against was as good as just selling themselves into slavery or death. Um, so they decided to march north along the Tigris River and directly towards where Artaxerxes had been encamped. They did this secretly, without announcing it to anyone, basically, in the middle of the night. And come the morning, Artaxerxes basically woke up with a whole encampment of 10,000 Greeks just across the river from him, and shit his pants and sent one of his uh, I forget the term. It's the ruler of a satrapy, which is basically like a lesser kingdom, um, but a portion of his land. I think it's just the satrap. You know, he sent a fellow by the name of Tissaphernes, who was a rival of Cyrus for a long time, um, but at least tried to appear amicable to the Greeks about getting them back home, to strike a deal, effectively, allowing them safe passage and the ability to buy what provisions they needed as they traveled back, from whatever market they could furnish for the army to buy from. In exchange, they would leave peacefully. And that went on for some time, though both parties grew increasingly suspicious of each other. Um, they had sworn oaths that they wouldn't harm each other, but as the suspicion grew, the generals of the Greeks decided that they would basically confront Tissaphernes about it and figure out what could be done to ameliorate this mutual distrust. And in doing so, Tissaphernes decided that the best way to ameliorate the distrust was to gather up all the generals who had come to see him, and have them all arrested and either killed or imprisoned, and to kill all of the bodyguard who came with the generals. Needless to say, this left the Greeks pretty demoralized and upset, feeling like there was no safe way for them to travel home. But with really no other choice, Xenophon, the author of our story, decided that he would take it upon himself to basically kick everyone's asses into gear and remind them that if they sit around and wallow in their sadness about losing their leaders, they were just going to die anyway. So they had best figure their things out, appoint new leaders, get rid of anything they didn't need to carry with them, and start beating their feet north as soon as possible to get out of this place. Of course, as you may be aware, this is a historical account. There's also quite likely some exaggerations, because this is Xenophon writing about Xenophon, and he would use this account of his story in Greece to sort of cement himself in the eyes of his fellow Athenians, for political reasons. So anything that paints Xenophon in a particularly good light, you should always question, because there's certainly some exaggeration involved, almost certainly anyway. But naturally, of course, the Greeks gathered together, they appointed new leaders, and they started heading north along the river. and tried to make their way out of Persia. They went quite a long ways through various mountains, wound up fighting a lot of people along the way, were constantly harried from behind by cavalry, which they didn't really have a good answer for, but had to do what they could in order to continue to try to make their way out of the Persian territory and back to Greece. And where last we left our story, they had just arrived in the land of Trapezus, or as we would come to know later, Trebizond, which is a Pontic, or was a Pontic territory in northeast Anatolia by what is today Georgia. It's just in the southeast of the Black Sea. And as they had arrived and started to sort of have some festivities there and celebrate the fact that they had returned to a territory that was owned by Greek-speaking and culturally Greek people, even though it wasn't in Greece itself. That's where we left off at the end of Book 4. I think it's a fairly decent summary. Covers most of the big events. But if you do want the full thing, the videos will be up as soon as I finish Part 1's proper video. I'll return everything and I'll get started to work on Part 2. Excuse me. Sorry. It's not the company. Your boy's just a little eepy. But, with all that said, I see no reason why we shouldn't get started on our reading of Book 5 for the night. Giving folks some time to get here. And so, let us delve into Book 5 of Anabasis. Book 5. In the preceding portion of the narrative, a detailed account is given of all that the Hellenes did and how they fared on their march up with Cyrus, and also of all that befell them on their march subsequently, until they reached the seaboard of the Euxine Sea, or Pontus, and the Hellenic city of Trapezus, where they duly offered the sacrifice for safe deliverance which they had vowed to offer as soon as they set foot on a friendly soil. Chapter 1. After this, they met and took counsel concerning the remainder of the march. The first speaker was Anteleon of Thurii. He rose and said, "For my part, sirs, I am weary by this time of getting kit together and packing up for a start, of walking and running and carrying heavy arms, and of tramping along in line, or mounting guard and doing battle. The sole desire I now have is to cease from all these pains, and for the future, since here we have the sea before us, to sail on, stretched out in sleep like Odysseus, and so to find myself in Hellas." When they heard these remarks, the soldiers showed their approval with loud cries of "Well said!" And then another spoke to the same effect, and then another, and indeed all present. Then Chrysophus got up and said, "I have a friend, sirs, who, as good hap will have it, is now High Admiral, Anabasis. If you like to send me to him, I think I can safely promise to return with some men of war and other vessels which will carry us." All you have to do, if you are really minded to go home by sea, is to wait here till I come. I will be back ere long." The soldiers were delighted at these words, and voted that Chrysophis should set sail on his mission without delay. After him, Xenophon got up and spoke as follows. "Chrysophis, it is agreed, sets out in search of vessels, and we are going to await him. Let me tell you what, in my opinion, it is reasonable to do while we are waiting. First of all, we must provide ourselves with necessaries from hostile territory, for there is not a sufficient market, nor, if there were, have we, with a few solitary exceptions, the means of purchase. Now, the district is hostile, so that if you set off in search of provisions without care and precaution, the chances are that many of us will be lost. To meet this risk, I propose that we should organize foraging parties to capture provisions, and, for the rest, not roam about the country at random. The organization of the matter should be left to us." The resolution was passed. "Please listen to another proposal," he continued. "Some of you, no doubt, will be going out to pillage. It will be best, I think, that whoever does so should in each case before starting inform us of his intent, and in what direction he means to go, so that we may know the exact number of those who are out and of those who stop behind. Thus we will be able to help in preparing and starting the expedition where necessary, and in case of aid or reinforcements being called for, we shall know in what direction to proceed. Or again, if the attempt is to be undertaken by raw or less expert hands, we may throw in the weight of our experience and advice by endeavoring to discover the strength of those whom they design to attack." This proposal was also carried. "Here is another point," he continued, "to which I would draw your attention. Our enemies will not lack leisure to make raids upon us, nor is it unnatural that they should lay plots for us, for we have appropriated what is theirs. They are seated over us, ever on the watch. I propose, then, that we should have regular outposts round the camp. If we take it in succession to do picket and outlook duty, the enemy will be less able to harry us. And here is another point for your observation. Supposing we knew for certain that Chrysophis must return with a sufficient number of vessels, there would be no need of the remark. But as that it is still problematical, I propose that we should try to get together vessels on the spot also. If he comes and finds us already provided for here, we shall have more ships than we need, that is all. While if he fails to bring them, we shall have the local supply to fall back upon. I see ships sailing past perpetually, so we have only to ask the loan of some warships from the men of Trapezus, and we can bring them into port, and safeguard them with their rudders unshipped, until we have enough to carry us. By this course, I think we shall not fail of finding the means of transport requisite." That resolution was also passed. He proceeded. "Consider whether you think it equitable to support by means of a general fund the ship's companies which we so impress, while they wait here for our benefit, and to agree upon a fare on the principle of repaying kindnesses in kind." That too was passed. "Well then," said he, "in case, after all, our endeavors should not be crowned with success, and we find that we have not vessels enough, I propose that we should enjoin on the cities along the seaboard the duty of constructing and putting in order the roads which we hear are impassable. They will be only too glad to obey, no doubt, out of mere terror and their desire to be rid of us." This last proposal was met by loud cries and protestations against the idea of going by land at all. So, perceiving their infatuation, he did not put the question to the vote, but eventually persuaded the cities voluntarily to construct roads by the suggestion, "If you get your roads in good order, we shall all the sooner be gone." They further got a 50-oared galley from the They further got a 50-oared galley from the Trapezontines, and gave the command of it to Xipus, a Laconian, one of the Perioci. This man altogether neglected to collect vessels on the offing, but slunk off himself and vanished, ship and all, out of Pontus. Later on, however, he paid the penalty of his misdeeds. He became involved in some meddling and making in Thrace at the court of Zeus. He became involved in some meddling and making in Thrace at the court of Seuthes, and was put to death by the Laconian Nicander. They also got a 30-oared galley, the command of which was entrusted to Polycrates, an Athenian, and that officer brought into harbor to the camp all the vessels he could lay his hands on. If these were laden, they took out the freights and appointed guards to keep an eye on their preservation, whilst they used the ships themselves for transport service on the coast. While matters stood at this point, the Hellenes used to make forays with varying success. Sometimes they captured prey, and sometimes they failed. On one occasion, Cleonatus led his own and another company against a strong position, and was killed himself, with many others of his party. Rip Cleonatus. But no, this is what I was talking about earlier in regards to Xenophon sort of embellishing the account. I have doubts he made every single one of those suggestions. He may not have made any of those suggestions, in fact. Though, I mean, it might have been unfair to suggest that he didn't offer at least a few, or at least maybe one. But, like, he paints himself as this mastermind of, like, setting the example for everyone. And I just do not believe at all that he is the only one offering these suggestions. I feel like this was a council that was held, and probably several people put their voices forward. And in his retelling, he just pretended he was all of them. Because it sounds like a thing Xenophon would do. Oh my word, no wonder I'm so tired. It's 28 degrees in my room. It is spicy in here. What is the temperature supposed to be this week? Of course, it's going to drop down below freezing on Monday. But it's going to be... what? 22 degrees tomorrow? That's like 78 in freedom. Anyway, I'm gonna go crack a window. It's a little too much for you, boy. Okay, that should give us a nice little breeze for now. Help keep things from being thermonuclear in here. Oh. But we still have several chapters to go. So, without further ado, let us continue with Chapter 2. Chapter 2. The time came when it was no longer possible to capture provisions, going and returning to the camp in one day. In consequence of this, Xenophon took some guides from the Trebizond and led the... God, I keep stumbling on that word. Trapezentines. In consequence of this, Xenophon took some guides from the Trapezentines and led half the army out against the Dryle, leaving the other half to guard the camp. That was necessary, since the Colchians, who had been ousted from their houses, were assembled thickly, and sat eyeing them from the heights above. On the other hand, the Trapezentines, being friendly to the native inhabitants, were not for leading the Hellenes to places where it was easy to capture provisions, but against the Dryle, from whom they personally suffered, they would lead them with enthusiasm, up into the mountainous and scarcely accessible fortresses, and against the most warlike people of any in the Pontus. But when the Hellenes had reached the uplands, the Dryle set fire to all their fastness, which they thought could be taken easily, and beat a retreat. And except here and there a stray pig or bullock or other animal which had escaped the fire, there was nothing to capture. But there was one fastness which served as their metropolis. Into this the different streams of people collected. Round it ran a tremendously deep ravine, and the approaches to the place were difficult. So the light infantry ran forward 5 or 6 furlongs in advance of the heavy infantry, and crossed the ravine. And seeing quantities of sheep and other things, proceeded to attack the place. Close at their heels followed a number of those who had set out on the foray, armed with spears, so that the storming party across the ravine amounted to no more than 2,000. But, finding that they could not take the place by a coup de main, as there was a trench running around it, mounted up some breadth, with a stockade on the top of the earthwork, and a close-packed row of wooden bastions, they made an attempt to run back, but the enemy fell upon them from the rear. To get away by a sudden rush was out of the question, since the descent from the fortress into the ravine only admitted of moving in single file. Under the circumstances, they sent to Xenophon, who was in command of the heavy infantry. The messenger came and delivered his message. "There is a fastness choked full of all sorts of stores, but we cannot take it. It is too strong. Nor can we easily get away. The enemy rush out and deliver battle, and the return is difficult." On hearing this, Xenophon pushed forward his hand. Try that again. On hearing this, Xenophon pushed forward his heavy infantry to the edge of the ravine, and there ordered them to take up a position, while he himself, with the officers, crossed over to determine whether it were better to withdraw the party already across, or to bring over the heavy infantry also, on the supposition that the fortress might be taken. In favor of the latter opinion, it was agreed that the retreat must cost many lives, and the officers were further disposed to think they could take the place. Xenophon consented, relying on the victims, for the seers had announced that there would be a battle, but that the result of the expedition would be good. So he sent the officers to bring the heavy troops across, while he himself remained, having drawn off all the light infantry and forbidden all sharpshooting at long range. As soon as the heavy infantry had arrived, he ordered each captain to form his company in whatever way he hoped to make it most effective in the coming struggle. Side by side together they stood, these captains, not for the first time today, competitors for the award of manly virtue. While they were thus employed, he, the general, was engaged in passing down his order along the ranks of the light infantry and archers, respectively, to march with the javelin on its thong and the arrow to the string, ready at the word shoot to discharge their missiles, while the light troops were to have their wallets well stocked with sling stones. Lastly, he dispatched his adjutants to see to the proper carrying out of these orders. And now the preparations were complete. The officers and lieutenants, and all others claiming to be... Let me try that again. The officers and lieutenants, and all others claiming to be peers of these, were drawn up in their several places. With a glance, each was able to command the rest in the crescent-like disposition which the ground invited. Presently the notes of the battle hymn arose. The clarion spoke, and with a thrilling cry in honor of the warrior god, commenced a rush of the heavy infantry, at full speed under the cover of a storm of missiles, lances, arrows, bullets, but most of all stones hurled from the hand with ceaseless pelt, while there were some who brought firebrands to bear. Overwhelmed by this crowd of missiles, the enemy left their stockades and their bastion towers, which gave Agasius the Stymphalian and Philoxenus of Pellene a chance not to be missed. Laying aside their heavy arms, up they went in bare tunics only, and one hauled another up. And meantime another had mounted, and the place was taken, as they thought. Then the peltists and light troops rushed in and began snatching what each man could. Xenophon, the while, posted at the gates, kept back as many of the hoplites as he could, for there were other enemies now visible on certain strong citadel heights, and after a lapse of no long time, a shout arose within, and the men came running back, some still clutching what they had seized, and presently here and there a wounded man, and mighty was the jostling about the portals. To the questions which were put to them, the outpouring fugitives repeated the same story. There was a citadel within, and enemies in crowds were making savage sallies and beating the fellows inside. At that, Xenophon ordered Ptolemades the herald to proclaim, "Enter all who are minded to capture aught!" In poured the surging multitude, and the countercurrent of persons elbowing their passage in prevailed over the stream of those who issued forth, until they beat back and cooped up the enemy within the citadel again. So outside the citadel, everything was sacked and pillaged by the Hellenes, and the heavy infantry took up their position, some about the stockades, others along the road leading up to the citadel. Xenophon and the officers meantime considered the possibility of taking the citadel, for if so, their safety was assured, but if otherwise, it would be very difficult to get away. As the result of their deliberations, they agreed that the place was impregnable. Then they began making preparations for the retreat. Each set of men proceeded to pull down the palisading, which faced themselves. Further, they sent away all who were useless or who had enough to do to carry their burdens, with the mass of the heavy infantry accompanying them. The officers in each case leaving behind men whom they could severally depend on. But as soon as they began to retreat, out rushed upon them from within a host of fellows, armed with wicker shields and lances, greaves, and Paphlagonian helmets. Others might be seen sealing the houses on this side and that of the road leading to the citadel. Others might be seen scaling the houses on this side and that of the road, leading into the citadel. Even pursuit in the direction of the citadel was dangerous, since the enemy kept hurling down on them great beams from above, so that to stop and to make off were alike dangerous, and night approaching was full of terrors. But in the midst of their fighting and their despair, some god gave them a means of safety. All of a sudden, by whatsoever hand ignited, a flame shot up. It came from a house on the right hand, and as this gradually fell in, the people from the other houses on the right took to their heels and fled. Xenophon, laying this lesson of fortune to heart, gave orders to set fire to the left-handed houses also, which being of wood burned quickly, with the result that the occupants of these also took to flight. The men immediately at their front were the sole annoyance now, and these were safe to fall upon them, as they made their exit and in their descent. And these were safe to fall upon them, as they made their exit and in their descent. Here, then, the word was passed for all who were out of range to bring up logs of wood, and pile them between themselves and the enemy. And when there was enough of these, they set them on fire. They also fired the houses along the trenchwork itself, so as to occupy the attention of the enemy. Thus they got off, though with difficulty, and escaped from the place by putting a fire between them and the enemy. And the whole city was burnt down, houses, turrets, stockading, and everything belonging to it except the citadel. Next day the Hellenes were bent on getting back with the provisions, but as they dreaded the descent to Trapezus, which was precipitous and narrow, they laid a false ambuscade, and a Mysian called after the name of his nation, Mysis, took 10 of the Cretians and halted in some thick bushy ground, where he made a feint of endeavoring to escape the notice of the enemy. The glint of their light shields, which were of brass, now and again gleamed through the brushwood. The enemy, seeing it all through the thicket, were confirmed in their fears of an ambuscade, but the army, meanwhile, was quickly making its descent, and when it appeared that they had crept down far enough, the signal was given to the Mysian to flee as fast as he could, and he, springing up, fled with his men. The rest of the party, that is, the Cretians, saying, "We are caught if we race," left the road and plunged into a wood, and tumbling and rolling down the gullies, were saved. The Mysian, fleeing along the road, kept crying for assistance, which they sent him, and picked him up wounded. The party of rescue now beat a retreat themselves with their face to the foe, exposed to a shower of missiles, to which some of the Cretan bowmen responded with their arrows. In this way, they all reached the camp in safety. Well, clever little trick to drop a fake ambush. Not really something you think of doing. Laying an obvious ambush that is also fake. Welcome in, Momo. I'm sorry you had trouble finishing your Japanese, but I hope you were able to get that taken care of. Well, welcome into the stream. We're a couple chapters deep. I'm sorry if you missed them, but the VOD will be there for later if you want to go back to it. Though I say that, and then remember that I'm probably going to take down the VOD until I get book 1 finished, but You know, I will unlist the VOD and I'll go ahead and post a link to it in the Discord for those who want to watch the VODs. I think I said that was what I was going to do as a workaround. It's just to keep those who haven't seen book one or who don't know about it in a place where they don't have to worry about it until book one is released. And so I'm not just dragging in random people who haven't read book one yet with books 2 through 7. Well, I'm glad you're excited. I'm looking forward to putting them together. It's going to be a time, I'm sure. I have. It's been a wonderful little stream so far, although I'm a little tired. I also realize why I'm so tired. It's what's the conversion in freedom? It's like 86 degrees in my room. Okay, it's more like 82 now, but yeah, yeah, it hasn't been pleasant. I did crack a window though, and it's starting to cool down a bit, so that's helping. But it was hot. It still is kind of hot. But we'll get there. I'm sorry, it is not the company. I'm gonna sleep well tonight. I, I, I mean, I like the warm. It just makes me sleepy. This temperature is honestly like as an ambient temperature, like where I am right now. Other than like, how do I put this? If I were in bed and I were covered up, I would be a sweaty mess. But like, this is perfect, like t-shirt, short weather. Like the ambient temperature is nice and warm. It's not too hot. It's not like cold. It's nice. As someone who lives in a country where it is routinely too damn cold, a country where it will be returning to being routinely too damn cold within like the next few days, it's nice to enjoy some warmth when it does come around. Anyway, blathering about my life aside, we do still have, I think, 6 more chapters tonight. There's chapter 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, Jesus. Chapter 6 is huge. Chapter 7's huge, too. Chapter 8's not bad. But yeah, we've got 8 chapters tonight. And we're done a quarter of them. So let's get on to quarter two and get into it, because we still got a lot of reading, and I don't want to be up all night. I don't know if I can be up all night from how I've been feeling. So let's press on. Chapter 3. And when Chrysophis did not arrive, and the supply of ships was insufficient, and to get provisions longer was impossible, they resolved to depart. On board the vessels they embarked the sick, and those above 40 years of age, with the boys and women, and all the baggage which the soldiers were not absolutely forced to take for their own use. The two eldest generals, Philesius and Sophonetus, were put in charge, and so the party embarked, while the rest resumed their march, for the road was now completely constructed. Continuing their march that day and the next, on the third they reached Anabasis, a Hellenic city on the sea, and a colony of Xenophon, in the country of the Colchians. Here they halted 10 days, and there was a review and numbering of the troops under arms, when there were found to be 8,600 men. So many had escaped, the rest had perished at the hands of the enemy, or by reason of the snow or else disease. At this time and place they divided the money accruing from the captives sold, and a tithe selected for Apollo and Artemis of the Ephesians was divided between the generals, each of whom took a portion to guard for the gods, Neon the Asinian taking on behalf of Chrysophis. Out of the portion which fell to Xenophon, he caused a dedicatory offering to Apollo to be made and dedicated among the treasures of the Athenians at Delphi. It was inscribed with his own name and that of Proxenus, his friend, who was killed with Clearchus. The gift for Artemis of the Ephesians was, in the first instance, left behind by him in Asia at the time when he left that part of the world himself with Agassiz. The gift for Artemis of the Ephesians was, in the first instance, left behind by him in Asia at the time when he left that part of the world himself with Agesilaus on the march into Boeotia. He left it behind in charge of Megabaezus. I'll try that again. He left it behind in charge of Megabaezus, the sacristan on the god. He left it behind in charge of Megabaezus, the sacristan of the goddess, thinking that the voyage on which he was... God, I cannot make it through this sentence. I hate myself right now. Let me try that again. He left it behind in charge of Megabaezus, the sacristan of the goddess, thinking that the voyage on which he was starting was fraught with danger. In the event of his coming out of it alive, he charged Megabaezus to restore to him the deposit, but should any evil happen to him, when he was to cause to be made and to dedicate on his behalf to Artemis. But should any evil happen to him, then he was to cause to be made and to dedicate on his behalf to Artemis whatsoever thing he thought would be pleasing to the goddess. In the days of his banishment, when Xenophon was now established by the Lacedaemonians as a colonist in Silice, a place which lies on the main road to Olympia, Megabaezus arrived on his way to Olympia as a spectator to attend the games, and restored to him the deposit. Xenophon took the money and bought for the goddess a plot of ground at a point indicated to him by the oracle. The plot, it so happened, had its own Selinus river flowing through it, just as at the The plot, it so happened, had its own Selinus... Can I just speak normally? That'd be great. The plot, it so happened, had its own salinous river flowing through it, just as at Ephesus, the river. Um, the plot, it so happened, had its own Selinus river flowing through it, just as at Ephesus the river Selinus flows past the temple of Artemis, and in both streams fish and mussels are to be found. On the estate at Silis, there is hunting and shooting of all the beasts of the chase that are. Here, with the sacred money, he built an altar and a temple. Tip of the tongue, the teeth, the lips. Can I pronounce quickly, please? Here, with the sacred money, he built an altar and a temple, and ever after, year by year, tithed the fruits of the land in their season, and did sacrifice to the goddess, while all the citizens and neighbors, men and women, shared in the festival. The goddess herself provided for the banqueters meat and loaves and wine and sweetmeats, with portions of the victims sacrificed from the sacred pasture, as also of those which were slain in the chase. For Xenophon's own lads, with the lads of the other citizens, always made a hunting excursion against the festival day, in which any grown men who liked might join. The game was captured partly from the sacred district itself, partly from Pholoe. The game was captured partly from the sacred district itself, partly from Pholoe, pigs and gazelles and stags. The place lies on the direct road from Lacedaemon to Olympia, about 20 furlongs from the temple of Zeus on Olympia, and within the sacred enclosure there is meadowland and wood-covered hills, suited to the breeding of pigs and goats and cattle and horses, so that even the sumpter animals of the pilgrims passing to the feast fare sumptuously. The shrine is girdled by a grove of cultivated trees, yielding desert fruits. The shrine is I just cannot word tonight. The shrine is girdled by a grove of cultivated trees, yielding dessert fruits in their season. The temple itself is a facsimile on a small scale of the great temple at Ephesus, and the image of the goddess is like the golden statue at Ephesus, save only that it is made not of gold, but of cypress wood. Beside the temple stands a column bearing the inscription, "The place is sacred to Artemis. He who holds it and enjoys the fruits of it is bound to sacrifice yearly a tithe of the produce, and from the residue thereof to keep in repair the shrine. If any man fail in aught of this, the goddess herself will look to it that the matter shall not sleep." Well, I mean, again, here we have more of just Xenophon propagandizing. Like, utterly unrelated to the journey itself. He's just laying out what he had done to have a temple built to Artemis. Like, all of this well before the trip, and presumably maintained well after. But he just had to say, like, hey, we split up all the money and made dedications to the gods. And Xenophon donated to Apollo as a sacrifice, and also in the name of Kirasophos, I believe. But either way, he did that, but like, oh, well, why didn't he dedicate to Artemis? Everyone else did. Like, well, you see, he actually secretly, a while ago, before he went on the journey, he made an offering, and he made a return on that offering and decided that he would build a temple of Artemis back home on a small patch of land he bought with the proceeds from making it back. And he built a whole little sacred grove to Artemis's worship, and then had a plaque written to ensure that anyone who ever came into possession of it later would follow through his whims to make sure that Artemis was properly sacrificed to. And it's like, yeah, okay, sure. But, like, what did that have to do with his journey right now? Like, y'all are gathering together ships to sail back home, and you're going on like a 5 paragraph rant about like this one great shrine you put together with the money you allegedly gave to someone before you left, and the returns from it. It just seems a little silly. Uh, well, I I will say I'm going to try to get through this chapter, but I'm going to see how I'm feeling after this chapter because right now I don't know if I'm going to make it through this whole book tonight. I wanted to. I thought I would, but I don't think I'm going to be able to. I'm falling asleep in my chair just a little bit. And while it would please me greatly to complete the book, I might have to split this into 2 streams and just like do the rest tomorrow or something before my D&D, which realistically shouldn't be too hard. I normally don't stream on Saturdays or Sunday. Usually I don't stream today, but like I wanted to try and make this up to folks because I felt bad that I missed Monday night. But even now, I feel like I might have to cut this short because I'm just struggling to stay awake. God. Yeah, no. I don't even think I'm gonna question that. I'm gonna finish this last chapter 4, and that'll be the halfway, and then I think I'll call it there. I do hate to show up late and then not really get too deep into the story, but I wish I could keep going, but I'm beat. I need to rest. The best I can promise you other than that is to come back tomorrow and get more of this done during the day when I am not so exhausted. I don't know, maybe it would be better to do a stream like this during a time like that when my eyes aren't so tired and I'm able to read more clearly. I like reading these at night because I know there are some people who like to listen in and use them as bedtime stories, so to speak. But anyway, Let's get this last chapter for me for tonight out of the way. Chapter 4. From Cerasis, they continued the march, the same portion of the troops being conveyed by sea as before, and the rest marching by land. When they had reached the frontiers of the... God, what a name. When they had reached the frontiers of the Macedonians? When they had reached the frontiers of the Macedonians, I'm going to look up the pronunciation of this before I butcher it anymore. And then I'm just going to start over. I was pronouncing it right. Macedonians. I believe. Macedonians. Okay. Let me try that again. From Cerasis, they continued the march, the same portion of the troops being conveyed by sea as before, and the rest marching by land. When they had reached the frontiers of the Macedonians, they sent to him Timothy. God, really? When they had reached the frontiers of the Macedonians, they sent to him Timotheus the Trapezontine, who was the proxenos of the Macedonians. To inquire whether they were to pass through their territory as friends or foes. They, trusting in their strongholds, replied that they would not give them passage. It was then that Timotheus informed them that the Macedonians on the farther side of the country were hostile to these members of the tribe, and it was resolved to invite the former to make an alliance, if they wished it. So Timotheus was sent, and came back with their chiefs. On their arrival, there was a conference of the Macedonian chiefs and the generals of the Hellenes, and Xenophon made a speech which Timotheus interpreted. He said, Men of the Macedonians, our desire is to reach Hellas in safety, and since we have no vessels, we must needs go by foot. But these people who, as we hear, are your enemies, prevent us. Will you take us for your allies? Now is your chance to exact vengeance for any wrong which they at any time may have put upon you. And for the future, they will be your subjects. But if you send us about our business and consider and ask yourselves, from what quarter will you ever again obtain so strong a force to help you? To this the chief of the Macedonians made answer, that the proposal was in accordance with their wishes, and they welcomed the alliance. Good, said Xenophon. But to what use do you propose to put us, if we become your allies? And what will you in turn be able to do to assist our passage? They replied, We can make an incursion into this country's hostile... We can make an incursion into this country, hostile to yourselves and us, from the opposite side, and also send you ships and men to this place, who will aid you in fighting and conduct you on the road. On this understanding, they exchanged pledges and were gone. The next day they returned, bringing 300 canoes, each hollowed out of a single trunk. There were 3 men in each, 2 of whom disembarked and fell into rank, whilst the third remained. Then the one set took the boats and sailed back again, whilst the other 2/3 who remained marshaled themselves in the following way. They stood in rows of about 100 each, like the rows of dancers in a chorus, standing vis-a-vis to one another, and all bearing wicker shields, made of white oxhide, shaggy and shaped like an ivy leaf. In the right hand they brandished a javelin about 6 cubits long, with a lance in front, and rounded like a ball at the butt end of the shaft. Their bodies were clad in short frocks, scarcely reaching to the knees, and in texture closely resembling that of a linen bedclothes bag. On their heads they wore leathern helmets, just like the Paphlagonian helmet, with a tuft of hair in the middle, as like a tiara in shape as possible. They carried, moreover, iron battle-axes. Then one of them gave, as it were, the keynote, and started, while the rest, taking up the strain and the step, followed, singing and marking time. Passing through the various corps and heavy-armed battalions of the Hellenes, they marched straight against the enemy, to what appeared the most assailable of his fortresses. It was situated in front of the city, or mother city, as it was called, which latter contains the high citadel of the Mossynoeces. Apologies. It was situated in front of the city, or mother city, as it is called, which latter contains the high citadel of the Mossynoesians. This citadel was the real bone of contention, the occupants at any time being acknowledged as the masters of all the other Mossynoesians. The present holders, so it was explained, had no right to its possession. For the sake of self-aggrandizement, they had seized what was really common property. Some of the Hellenes followed the attacking party, not under the orders of the generals, but for the sake of plunder. As they advanced, the enemy for a while kept quiet, but as they got near the place, they made a sortie and routed them, killing several of the barbarians, as well as some of the Hellenes who had gone up with them, and so pursued them until they saw the Hellenes advancing to the rescue. Then they turned round and made off, first cutting off the heads of the dead men and flaunting them in the face of the Hellenes and of their own private foes, dancing the while and singing in a measured strain. But the Hellenes were much vexed to think that their foes had only been rendered bolder, while the Hellenes who had formed part of the expedition had turned tail and fled, in spite of their numbers, a thing which had not happened previously during the whole expedition. So Xenophon called a meeting of the Hellenes and spoke as follows. Soldiers! Do not in any wise be cast down by what has happened. Be sure that good, no less than evil, will be the result. For to begin with, you know certainly that those who are going to guide us are in very deed hostile to those with whom necessity drives us to quarrel. And, in the next place, some of our own body, these Hellenes who have made so light of orderly array and conjoint action with ourselves, as though they must needs achieve in the company of barbarians all they could with ourselves, have paid the penalty and been taught a lesson, so that another time they will be less of a better sort, and prove to the enemy that battle with the undisciplined is one thing, but with men like yourselves another. Accordingly, they halted, as they were, that day. Next day they sacrificed, and finding the victims favorable, they breakfasted, formed the companies into columns, and with their barbarians, arranged in similar order on their left, began their march. Between the companies were the archers, only slightly retired behind the front of the heavy infantry, on account of the enemy's active light troops, who ran down and kept up volleys of stones. These were held in check by the archers and peltists, and steadily, step by step, the mass marched on, first to the position from which the barbarians and those with them had been driven 2 days back, and where the enemy were now drawn up to meet them. Thus it came to pass that the barbarians first grappled with the Peltists, and maintained the battle until the heavy infantry were close, when they had turned and fled. The Peltists followed without delay, and pursued them right up to their city, while the heavy troops in unbroken order followed. As soon as they were up at the houses of the capital, there and then the enemy, collecting all together in one strong body, fought valiantly, and hurled their javelins, or else clenched their long stout spears, almost too heavy for a man to wield, and did their best to ward off the attack at close quarters. But when the Hellenes, instead of giving way, kept massing together more thickly, the barbarians fled from this place also, and in a body deserted the fortress. Their king, who sat in his wooden tower, or mausoleum, built on the citadel, there he sits, and there they maintain him, all at the common cost, and guard him narrowly. Refuse to come forth. Refuse to come forth, as did also those in the fortress first taken, and so were burnt to a cinder where they were, their mausoleums, themselves, and all. The Hellenes, pillaging and ransacking these places, discovered in the different houses treasures and magazines of loaves, pile upon pile. The ancestral stores, as the Mossynoecians told them. But the new corn was laid up. Apart with the straw stalk and car altogether. Let me try that again. But the new corn was laid up apart with the straw stalk and ear. I hate myself. There's clearly a way this is meant to be read, and I'm not reading it that way, and I hate it. But the new corn was laid up apart with the straw, stalk and ear together, and this was for the most part spelt. Slices of dolphin were another discovery, in narrow-necked jars, all properly salted and pickled, and there was blubber of dolphin in vessels, which the Mossynoecians used previously as the Hellenes use oil. Then there were large stores of nuts on the upper floor, the broad kind without a division. This was also a chief article of food with them, boiled nuts and baked loaves. Wine was also discovered. This, from its rough, dry quality, tasted sharp when drunk pure, but mixed with water was sweet and fragrant. The Hellenes breakfasted, and then started forward on their march, having first delivered the stronghold to their allies among the Mossynoecians. As for the other strongholds belonging to tribes allied with their foes, which they passed en route, the most accessible were either deserted by their inhabitants, or gave in their adhesion voluntarily. The following description will apply to the majority of them. The cities were on average 10 miles apart, some more, some less, but so elevated is the country and intersected by such deep clefts that if they chose to shout across to one another, their cries would be heard from one city to another. When, in the course of their march, they came upon a friendly population, these would entertain them with exhibitions of fatted chicken belonging to the wealthy classes, fed up on boiled chestnuts until they were as white can be, of skin plump and delicate, and very nearly as broad as they were long, with their backs variegated and their breasts tattooed with patterns of all sorts of flowers. They sought after the women in the Hellenic army, and would fain have laid with them openly in broad daylight, for that was their custom. The whole community, male and female alike, were fair-complexioned and white-skinned. It was agreed that this was the most barbaric and outlandish people that they had passed through on that whole expedition, and the furthest removed from the Hellenic customs. doing in a crowd precisely what other people would prefer to do in solitude, and when alone behaving exactly as others would behave in company, talking to themselves and laughing at their own expense, standing still and then again capering about, wherever they might chance to be, without rhyme or reason, as if their sole business were to show off to the rest of the world. Well, I see. I wasn't expecting the 10,000 to stumble across the fabled white boy. And yet, here they have. Oh. I had to guess probably Proto-Germanics. And we do know that the river Volga does cut down to the Black Sea. That's a big part of how the Varangian guards were hired by the Byzantines during their time. So either Proto-Germanics or maybe Scandi. Anyway. That is enough for me to leave it here, I think. We went for a little over an hour. I apologize for not going further, but it is what it is. Your boy needs some rest. I will try and get chapter 5 through 8 taken care of tomorrow if there's time before stream. Or sorry, not stream, before D&D. If I have time to stream before D&D, which, you know, depending on when I wake up, I hopefully should. I do apologize for cutting things short, but like I said, I'm done. I can't. My eyes are cooked. My brain is cooked. I'm repeating myself like upwards of 5 times sometimes. It's like, it's not a good look. So I'm gonna call it there. I'm gonna go lay down. I'm gonna rest. And hopefully catch up on some of the sleep I've been missing. But for those of you who joined tonight, I'd like to thank you for making it out. I appreciate you being here, as always. It's always nice to see folks who enjoy a good story and want to come and relive one of the great adventures of human history. With all that said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, or night, wherever you are in the world. And as I say at the end of every stream, try not to take life too serious. We'll be back with more of this, hopefully tomorrow, if not then, on Monday. And we've got some other stuff cooking for next week as well, so I hope you're looking forward to joining us. And, hope to see you all very soon. Goodbye for now.